Welcome to the Independent Characters, episode 216. This is Carl, and I am joined by...
This is Jody.
Hey, Josh.
Thank you guys so much for joining, and we have quite an episode for you today. Before we get started on what the topic of the show is, I just wanted to throw out there real quick that as many of you who are returning listeners have seen, we are also throwing this up on YouTube. Not throwing up on YouTube, but we are throwing the video up on YouTube. It is the exact same content that you are getting in the audio channel. There's a little graphical...
Got some visual aids.
Some visual aids here that we won't really reference during the audio piece, but hey, if you want to see more, see it there on our YouTube channel. There's a link to it both in the... There's a link to our YouTube channel on the website, so you can go right there. Additionally, I just wanted to thank everybody for their positive response for our last episode. Having been, I made a joke about, I don't even know if podcasts are still relevant. I mean, to a point I was joking, to a point I was serious, but, we got a lot of very positive comments about it and about the show and about our return to the show. And I'm glad it means so much to so many people still.
So many people, so grateful, and just an overload of positivity in the comments, especially on the video side that I was monitoring. So
Yeah. Josh is the video guru. So we're very excited about the direction they're going. And we're going to do it's just going to get better. Hopefully this time we don't have the visual, the tracking of eyeballs going on.
Well, Aaron's not here, so the Necron...
that's what it was.
It was the Necron eyeball tracking. Yeah.
Perfect. So this episode, what we are going to be talking about, though, is we are going to be discussing rare 40K materials. And there are a lot of them out there. So we've picked, each of us has picked kind of one that we really want to focus on this go around. And, if this is a popular segment, we'll return to it and bring more items up. But we'll go into what these materials are, kind of what their history is with Warhammer 40,000 and Games Workshop, and a little bit about what's going on inside of those and why we think they're still relevant or at least interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that's the plan. Do you guys have anything to add before we just kind of kick off the show and get started?
Let's freaking do this.
All right.
Couches are warm, mics are going, cameras are rolling.
Here we go. All right, and we're back. So we're going to kick it off with a little bit of Elite Choice. Three for a spin there. Anyway, so we're going to start off with Elite Choice. And Jody, you're back. We'll get into that in a little bit, but why don't you tell us who your Elite Choice is and why?
All right. So I did.
And I realized, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I realized last time I didn't kind of introduce what Elite Choice is before we jumped into it. So if you're a new listener, what Elite Choice is in our community, in particular the Facebook group, as people post pictures of models they've painted or projects they're working on, we go through and we pick out one for each episode that we think is representative of some of the best quality stuff we're seeing of. And that doesn't necessarily mean the best painted. That can be the best idea, best concept, whatever. It could even be, I ran an event and here was the creative aspect of that. So it's not isolated to, this is the best painted thing I've ever seen.
It's an open category. It's something that stood out to us.
Thank you.
Yeah, something that was shared in the community that got you going.
There you go.
So what got me going?
What got you going, Jody?
Cameron Swarbrook, and I took the liberty that you all did last time that I said I get to scroll back somewhere in the last couple of years and find something. I didn't go that far back. A few months back, though, Cameron Swarbrook created, in the earliest inklings of 10th, created some new Tyranid warriors that are based on and I'm sorry, folks who feel differently, the really terrible old 90s era Tyranid warriors who are not as cool as the modern ones. I'll say that.
I don't think they are.
But he took that concept and then used modern bits and conversion to create something that really, really, I thought looked neat. A little reminiscent of Alien 4, the Ripley Alien hybrid. They've got a little of that going, which would look really creepy. And I just thought they were really outstanding conversions that were both a throwback and then a modern look at a kind of cool old concept.
Throwback and a throw forward.
Sure.
Yeah.
But not a throw up.
I would not have, this is a perfect example of what I was just saying. Like, these aren't painted.
Right.
They're just conversions at this point, but there's a lot of conversion here, and this is really cool.
And it's clean conversion.
Yeah.
When you look at them, you're not going, oh, well, that's a chunk off of this, and there's a big gobber of green stuff.
These are creepy looking.
Yeah, it looks like those are GW kits, which, back in the day was kind of what we always aim for, is if you're going to convert something, it should look like, well, that feels more or less like a GW kit.
Yep, it should fit, and a really cool concept too of matching the new models to that old style, and even the poses with whip and sword and everything like that. It's
spot on.
A beautiful evolution.
Yeah, that stupid Ninja painting video that came out at time of listening a couple weeks ago.
Oh, where you sent that over to me.
Yeah, these would look so good in that kind of earthy tones with the black carapace, and it would really, really like that color scheme. Then I saw this picture merged in my brain immediately. I was like, oh, nice. This is so good. This is so good.
Nice.
All right, what do you guys got?
Josh, let's go to you. And you beat me to it.
Yeah, holy cow.
So on that point, I will say that this was probably the hardest elite choice I've ever done, because so many people were just revamping the community. You had a note for this too, but just in the last 2 weeks since we recorded a week ago. So many people have just started posting kind of the highlights of their backlog of what they've been doing for the last 2 years, and there's just an overwhelming variety of amazing models, projects, games, etc. So it was hard to narrow it down, but I did. So Brett Barker, over the last 2 years, just COVID times in general, I think is what he said specifically, built an amazing 3D Necromunda terrain table. It's all Underhive themed. It's not Ashways. It's the Underhive theme there, but it's 3D. It's multi-leveled. It's painted. It's weathered. It's very intricate, and I just want to play a game on this board so bad right now.
I thought, to be honest, initially this was a Forge World display.
Oh yeah,
when he first showed the pictures, as you're scrolling through social media, I'm just like, oh, and here's a picture of Forge World table, and then I went back and read. I'm like, oh no, this is his table. This is super impressive.
Yeah, he's got resin pour in there for some slimy skunk pit stuff, sump pit. He's got streaking. He's got what looks like graffiti in there. Just really beautiful attention to detail, and just how narrative things would unfold just playing a game on this board.
Oh yeah,
immediately just makes me want to.
And listen, when you get Josh excited about a Necromunda table, like Josh is the Necromunda guy in our group, and we should use these as examples for where we want to go.
I'm really loving the different generations of bits that are pulled into that.
Yep.
That there's some of the old first Cities of Death stuff, and then some custom stuff, and some of the new stuff. Yeah, that is.
We have no excuse. We have 3D printers. We have all this jazz.
We do indeed.
God, this is really.
Oh, those are many hours of loving labor happening right there too. Not to be denied there, but
really impressive.
That first photo with the way he has it lit as well.
Yeah,
could be a CGI render for a game. Also, it's just a great photo of really, really beautiful work.
There's a Necromunda terrain makers group on Facebook, and a lot of time people will reference real life photos of abandoned industrial complexes.
Yeah.
And this 100% hits that nail on the head. So job well done, Brett.
Yeah. Nicely done. So my pick was from Ned Smith, and he was kind of one of the early people who had gotten in on here's what I've been doing over the last couple of years, like everybody in the community kind of regrouping. And Ned just posted, I have here a collage of pictures that he posted, and I just appreciated the bright colors he used in all these things. I tend to not use super bright colors when I paint. That's why I hired Colin to paint my bright color guys, and Dave paints to paint my bright colored ZH demons. But man, I looked at this and it immediately caught my eye, drew my attention.
Yeah.
I rarely see orcs painted this color blue. I just thought this was really, really well done. And it drew my eye right away. Yeah. So this was my choice. And then, like you said, he was one of the early people that was like, here's what I've been working on over the couple of years. And then it kind of kickstarted this whole resurgence of people saying, well, hey, we're glad you're back. Here's what I've been doing. Yeah. And this is one thing, just to sidetrack here for a minute, but this is one thing that I love about our community and I love about doing this show. And I was sharing some feedback we got just before recording with you from my buddy Craig in Australia, who had heard the show and listened to the show. He's not even playing 40K anymore.
Oh yeah.
And, no, but he hasn't for a while. He keeps flirting with getting back into it, but he just gave some feedback that was like, this is why you're important to the community, and the community is important to us. And
100%.
The objective was starting the show, become engaged with the community, become a larger part of the community, be part of the community, and let the community be part of what we have going on. And seeing these kinds of responses let me know, we've hit that mark. We've hit that mark really well. So anyway, all right. Well, listen, enough of that. Great work to the people that hit it out of the park this go around. We've got some other ideas that Josh and I are brewing up around YouTube content and stuff. So, and leveraging some of you folks in the community who are providing stuff. I mean, we're crowdsourcing content effectively, but there's some great stuff there that we want to help share widely and get you involved too. Again, being part of our gaming group. So we'll talk more about that in the future as we kind of solidify our plans. But let's leap into Workbench and talk about what we got going on. Mine is short as usual. I'm continuing to work on my Ash Waste Nomads. I expect to have those done by the next time we record. So again, we're recording fairly shortly after our first recording. We want to get
right. Yeah.
Much like painting, we want to keep our momentum going. And this was a good time. I think we actually would have done it next week, but Jody was like, I can really do it this week. Let's do it.
Yeah, next week gets a little crazy, as we'll talk about in a few moments.
There you go. And the other thing I've been preparing for is a Dark Heresy campaign. And I talked a little bit about this before. This will be ultimately part of our Patreon. I'll release an episode or two widely, and then the rest will be in our Patreon. But I was creating my own adventure for Dark Heresy for us to play through. And as I was looking to steal ideas from other Dark Heresy materials I had, I was reading through the adventure Tattered Fates. And as I'm reading through it, I look at a paragraph or section that was written, and I thought, man, this sounds real familiar. Like, this sounds like something Alan Bly would write. And then I would flip to the front and I see, John French and Alan Bly wrote this whole series. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'll run this. And so I reached out to John, who we have a personal friendship. And I reached out to John and I said, hey, here's what I'm thinking of doing. I think I would love to interview you for each section of the adventure, of these adventures, and talk about what went into writing them. What were you envisioning? What was your idea for how this would flow? And then what I'll do is I'm going to run the adventure. And so for each section of that adventure, I'll have both what our players do and how they approach the situation, followed by an interview with John talking about, here's what we envisioned, and we'll see how far off the mark we go.
And here's how the players ruined everything.
Yeah. But I think it'll be quite interesting.
Yeah.
And it's a unique opportunity. And John was like super excited. He's like, I'm in. Like, let's do it. That sounds great. So I'm very excited about that piece.
Wow, that would stress me out as a GM so much. Well, you emphasized the golden coin, right?
Oh, listen,
what golden coin?
I'm gonna be stressed out about it. But it's really good. I got some great ideas for how that's gonna play out.
Yeah.
So that's me. Josh, let's go to you.
Yeah. I have been just chipping away at things. First thing I did is I finished reading / listening of The Lion, which is the new return of Lionel Johnson, which was a really interesting read. Part of it helps bring the new timeline into a different perspective. It's the other side of the Nihilist Rift of, what the
Cicatrix Maledictum.
The Imperium doesn't have communication or a lot of info going on there.
I'm about halfway through the book, by the way.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to spoil anything here, but one thing I do want to point out is that I really like the direction they took with the kind of main bad guy in this one. It's their motivations are, what if we do the wrong thing for the right reasons? And I think that's a great thing to address in 40K. So I think you'll enjoy it when you get there.
Nice.
Just good read in general. Aeronautica, still continuing to work on that. I've got about 4 planes in progress right now. I've finished all the airbrush work on those. Again, these are the Thousand Suns, Age of Darkness, Heresy version of Aeronautica. So I'm on to the kind of just detail and freehand work on those now. And then the last thing I've already done the red on, is the Thunderhawk. So I'm going to save the Thunderhawk for last, and then should be done with that. It's not a ton of models you need to have a sizable force for that. So, that's making good progress. Necromunda, I continuing to work on my Not Cool and Piscean Spectre for an upcoming campaign, hopefully for summer. And I was making great progress and then had my airbrush just gum up out of nowhere. It had been neglected for a little while, so instead of making painting, again, we're recording about a week later, today I actually got to put my ultrasonic cleaner to good use to get that thing serviced. So, it's part of the hobby. You got to take care of your tools. So hopefully I'll have those painted up in the next couple weeks by the time we record again.
Well, it's interesting you brought up Aeronautica and working on those models, because we talked about that last episode, and I was saying how I wasn't that impressed with Aeronautica and yada yada. I don't know if you looked at our schedule of recording, but I changed it.
Oh, okay.
To bring that one a little bit forward. So we are going to be covering that very soon, and I think we'll cover it from a aspect of here were the Forge World way it played, and here's the way it plays now, and blah, blah. So there's I'm Aeronautica curious.
Yeah.
At this point. Especially after you talked about, like I had said, we just did dogfights, and you're like, well, if you play missions, and as soon as you said that, I was like, of course that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so much more dynamic things with ground assets and landing and actually like dropping troops off and things like that you just don't even address.
I didn't even know you could do that.
Exactly.
So, okay.
So dogfight is, it's like, it's a good intro to the game, but it's only the tip of the iceberg.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll get into that in that episode.
Cool.
Titanicus continues. I've done all the metallics on the Titans that I'm working on right now. Now that the airbrush has been serviced, I should be able to get get into the main kind of airbrush work of that for the kind of primary base coats on that.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. Right. And then one thing I was going to call out is I got nameplates for all my Titans. Which I worked with Nick from Versatile Terrain, and I actually was able to get files that he hasn't released yet. So I gave him all. So important. Yeah. Because I got into 3D printing with a resin printer now, so it opens up a lot of options for the hobby and being able to do stuff at home, which has been wildly satisfying and fun to do.
Are these, you order them in, or can you change the names on them yourself, or do you have to order the names from him?
So for the custom ones, the standard issue way is you send him what font you want to use, and there's a list of 30 fonts to choose from.
We'll include a link to this in the
absolutely.
show notes, because I really want to name my Titans too.
Yep. And so I've had names in a list going forever, but now it's like, let's get the physical version on there. The base way to do it is you supply the names and the font, and they'll be printed and shipped to you.
Nice.
There are a few options of which you can request what you want those to say and then print them yourselves for those of us with printers. So I took advantage of that option. It's the pattern of nameplates that I printed out are not yet available, but they'll probably be on the website. I'm actually going to give him some photos soon, so I'm sure I'll probably give him some photos that he can then use to put them on the website and help sell that design also. But anyways, it's just helping bring those to life. I got those all printed up. They're cleaned up. They're ready to go. I just need to prime and paint. And
I've seen Colin doing in some of his work, he's including nameplates and a lot of the stuff that he's doing. And the more I see it, when it first came out, I was like, oh, that's kind of nice. And the more I see it, I'm like, that looks really good.
So I have an editable file for a 32 millimeter diameter base, which for Kill Team has been amazing for having your guys individually named and called out, especially because I'm playing in a narrative campaign, which we'll get into in a minute here. But knowing which model did what specifically, you've got the nameplate telling you what guy did what, and having that to reference and
that's cool
in there. It's been amazing. So
I think it's one of those things that there are certain games that really lend themselves to that being really appropriate and feeling right. I don't know that I would want to see a 40K army.
An entire 40K army, no thanks. Maybe like an HQ or whatever.
Sure.
But Titanicus feels like such a good marriage.
Yeah, they're such sculpturesque models as it is. Yeah. That the plates always feel very at home there.
Yeah.
The plates I got to have, it's not just the Titan name, but then it has a little layer above that, which actually has the whole Legio on there. So they're all going to say Legio Zestobiax, and then the Titan's name inside of that, which
so cool.
Yeah, it'd be
the
rug that
detail
ties the room
level out of
together.
resin printers is
Top notch. Yeah.
yep,
Hard to beat.
pretty good.
Yeah, so that's me. It's been fairly productive for not being a lot of time, but I think I'll have a lot actually finished next time I record.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Jody.
All right. So I kind of took the per last episode though. So what's been going on?
Yes, please
Okay.
give us kind of the rundown on what's been going on with you over the last 2 years.
Try and keep it tidy. Did a little bit of a career lateral shift and then had an unintentional secondary one, but work is work and not play. That's why they're different words. So we can move on from that. Our kid moved out. So our kids continue to be very similar in their life trajectories without being willing to hang out.
I don't get it. Like literally, we've talked about this before. Like our two kids have the same interests, the same life paths in some ways, the same. And every time we get them together, like, hey,
Too similar.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
be.
You need that
Well,
opposite to
Larry,
attract.
because our kids are snarky too, was like,
As is mine.
well, just because you guys are friends, I don't see why we should be. And I'm like,
you don't have to be.
you don't have to be, but all right, fine, be that way.
Fine,
So
don't be.
So
You know what?
enjoying.
I forbid you from being friends.
Ooh, why didn't we do
We
that?
should try that. Damn, it still might work.
Still might.
It's your Gen X hipster thing that rubbed off on your kid.
Yeah,
But, yeah.
you know it did.
I don't care.
Yeah. But yeah, basically just enjoying empty nest life and living life and doing the thing. It's been a couple years, so there you go.
Let me ask you about that for
Yeah.
a minute and delving away from 40K and hobby talk for a minute. But like empty nester life as we are getting older, like is a real thing. Like our kid moved out. We have a large house. Fortunately here, we have room for
You got a studio.
Studio.
Yeah.
But the house is legitimately too large for just Shell and I. I mean, it really is. Like, there's a lot of upkeep that goes in. You got to clean it, blah, blah, blah. But like for a long time, we were like, now what do we do? And so for us,
Mm-hmm.
Shell got super into board games. I'm going to support that. She wants to get into 40K. I'm all about that. And we've made an effort to have new experiences.
Yeah.
That has been our key. Like, okay, this large portion of our life has changed, and now I want to make sure we continue to have these experiences. And so we've taken the time to kind of rebond in some ways as just a couple, as opposed to a couple of parents. You know?
Yeah. Now we're speaking the same language.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that aspect is fantastic when it's just you and your significant other and you got the whole house to yourself all the time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of perks to that. So that's great. Our move out for our daughter is much more recent.
Mm-hmm.
So we both did the really dumb thing and filled it up with work.
Yeah.
So the last
Been there.
year has been way too much work for
Yeah.
both of us. So it'll be really interesting over the next year or so as things unfold to see what that looks like. But getting to spend that time together, my wife and I used to get teased, frankly, that we like each other too much, that like we really enjoy each other's company. And even when we were dating, her friends would be like, what do y'all talk about all the time? We're like, we just like actually like hanging out.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the I have a sleepover every day with my best friend is pretty true. So, you know,
Are you
gross.
staying over at
schmoopy
Josh's
stuff.
place?
Often as Steph will let me.
There's a hall pass situation.
There, we got it sorted. Speaking of hanging out with
We
my,
are very fortunate. Actually, the three people sitting right here, we are very fortunate that we are all in that same situation with with our spouses. So it works out quite well.
being able to
And
just enjoy that.
The fact that our spouses all get along too is fantastic.
Doesn't hurt.
And all like playing games.
Yes.
Yeah.
That also. So
Makes
speaking of games, because ostensibly we're here to talk about a game. We, during the pandemic, our daughter, the pandemic was really rough for her, more than most folks that were in a kind of our social circle. And she found Critical Role and really got into that and then got curious about role playing. So I was like, well, I used to play D&D back in the day. Like, let's play a little bit.
Yeah.
And Aaliyah was an avid D&D and role player when she and I first met. And so we started doing that. And then I showed the game to Matt, and Matt got excited about it because Matt gets excited about things. And since then, we've been playing a lot of RPGs, like a lot, and still doing that and enjoying that. That also, speaking of Matt, we still have the Crush podcast going.
Mm-hmm.
We are on we release when we have time to record an episode
By the
schedule.
way, people said we touched on every game, but one game we didn't touch on was Blood Bowl and
Blitz Bowl, the good one. I'm totally happy to take those slings and arrows at this point. And then through the course of the pandemic, did get the opportunity to do some play testing for what is now the current edition of Blitz Bowl Ultimate Edition. That was really fun. Still continue to, for such a dinky little game, shocked how much I still enjoy it.
Yeah.
And like it still presents enjoyment after literally hundreds and hundreds of games.
That's crazy.
And it hasn't changed all that much since it launched. So that's pretty outstanding. And then getting to painting and hobbying, because that's in theory what this section is about. The RPG stuff led me in a different hobby direction, as I, like a lot of folks, just wasn't playing Ninth and saying I wasn't super interested in Ninth is pretty gentle. So I started 3D printing, because 3D printing, if you're a role player, is holy cow. It's peas and carrots.
Yeah.
It is maximum usefulness. That's actually led me to a lot of new hobby techniques and like trying new. I always kind of painted slap chop, so it's been interesting seeing slap chop get popular, but then what can I pirate from it, and what can I blend with my own techniques? And definitely lean into speed painting.
Crop chop.
Crop chop.
I have no problem with that. No problem.
Did you see the post I made about it was to the Facebook group, and it was a video about a dry brush palette. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's one of those. It's one of those techniques that I've accidentally been doing for a while.
That's great,
because I just don't throw away the thing I clean off my dry brush on.
Yeah.
So I built up like layers of gobs of paint. I think it is a great way to learn to control your dry brushing.
Yeah.
Because
the thing that sold me on it was there's so many times I accidentally hit when I go to the white layer, I'm like, it's too much white.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
no,
so
I think it's fantastic. The thing I loved about it was the testing colors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like how, if you're using slap chop style methods or glazes and washes, or,
We'll include a link to this video. In
glazes over
too,
grayscale, which is the kind of the classic art sort of term. Well, not specifically, but it's a way to test those things. I think I learned to wet blend from dry brushing, and that seems like a weird like jump, but that's how I learned to blend, was from dry brushing. And then you dry brush and you'd have it gritty. Well, if you thin your paint enough, you can clean up the grittiness, and it shows you where the blend should be.
Right.
So I thought that was a fantastic tool. And something, I think it's neat that dry brushing, which was like it's dry brushing technique, has really come into its own as like, no, there's a correct way to do it. Yeah. And there's different applications, and just like any tool.
Yeah.
Let me see. Let me rattle through the rest of this. Still
sorry about interrupting.
No.
You're bringing up some great
It's been
topics.
A couple years. Not much in the way of GW other than Blitz Bowl. I have all of the current Blitz Bowl teams done. I tried. So Adepticon happened, which was an absolute blast. More on that in a moment. And I was going to surprise Josh, because I, shame, have still not painted my Adeptus Titanicus stuff. Legitimately, it is turned into one of those like mental block painting projects. Like, you know what it's like.
Pull off the Band-Aid, get it done.
Yeah, no. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to show up at Adepticon and be like, hey, Josh, check this out. And like have just a few Titans to show him. And I laughed when you were like, oh, my airbrush, because I sat down, rebased the silvers, started doing the whites, and like full lockup. And I was like, come on. So I do like the breakdown, quick clean, go again, full lockup. And I'm like, okay, it has been probably like 3-4 years since I last really
broke this thing out,
really did
worked
it.
Yeah.
Ultrasonicked it, but that the universe just said no. So this summer's to-do list is definitely getting that stuff up and running.
We'll see.
We'll see. Yeah, no, I'd like to, but I got a lot of summer
I hope
ones.
you do, but
Yeah, I'd like to get throttled by you repeatedly again.
I'll wear my medal.
Real quick. Yeah, you can actually throttle me with it. Adepticon. So Aaliyah got to play Space Hulk with us. That was great. She played Blitz Bowl for the first time ever, which some people laughed at.
Nice.
She had literally never played it, but played it there. Josh and I got to play a little bit.
Crushed you.
She did.
Yeah.
She skunked me her first 2 games.
Nice.
And she was like, so I can just throw this goblin into the end zone? I'm like, yeah. She's like,
I like this
yeah,
game.
but you need a sit clunk. So a 6, right? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, can I do it again? Yeah. So if I'm up by 10, I win. I was like, yeah. And she's like, well, let's play one more time. Maybe I missed something. She does it again. And I'm like, yeah, that's the game. Nice
roll
job.
6s.
Yeah, game's easy. Just roll 6s. My highlight, I will say this one thing, other than what I wanted from Adepticon was because I wasn't feeling very GW stoked, was to kind of get re-energized. And it does that in the extreme. It's just fun to be around everybody being excited about the hobby. And actually, I walked away really excited to return back to GW's models, which was a thing I'd kind of moved away from.
Yeah.
There's a very particular aesthetic with all things GW. And after 30 years, I'd kind of seen the aesthetic, like that's what their stuff looks like. And, I was ready for something new, but I'm also excited to get back to it. But while I was there, I was walking around. There's a lot of new games, people demoing games. And I found myself in this conversation with this really lovely older British gentleman. And he was talking about his new game that was coming out. And I started asking him about the rules and going back and forth. And I was like, oh, that's cool. This is a neat concept. Where did this come from? And then I looked down and read his name tag because I hadn't. And I'd been talking to him for about 15 minutes. And it was Andy Chambers. And then he's like, hey, you want to go demo the game? And I was like, and Aaliyah was like, I thought we were going to go crash for a minute. And I was like, well, you know what? Maybe I'll come back around. And I was like, walking by and I'm like, what did I do? I just got to demo the game. So I end up going, and Aaliyah and I grab a drink. Then she goes upstairs and I'm like, I'll go wander around some more. So I end up demoing the game with him because he's just there.
Yep.
And then I end up in like an hour-long conversation with him about like rules design and rules theory and why did you do it this way? And I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I asking these guys questions about like, how did you deal with the alternating activation problem? And then Gav Thorpe walks up and the conversation just keeps going. And I was like, so I basically got to just stand there and chat with Andy Chambers and Gav Thorpe for like an hour.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And like actually talk about game design, not like, well, I really like your stuff, but like some pretty nitty gritty stuff. And I was like, wow, that was weird. So Adepticon is good if you didn't know. That's my punchline on that.
This was your first time going to.
No, before the pandemic.
That's right.
Yep. We went. So it was great also to reconnect with.
That's right.
Getting to see some folks from when I dabbled in like working as a painter. I get to see some of those sculpting folks that I know and just a lot of different lovely humans that I don't get to see otherwise. COVID is bad. I will say that. Had not had it. Got it in my travels.
I came back with COVID as well.
Real bad.
Yeah,
I was over 2 weeks down and out. So Adepticon good, COVID bad. That's the sum up there.
In summation.
One last thing though. So I am very excited about 10th, as you guys said repeatedly last episode. And I've heard each of you at some point go, yeah, even Jody's excited. What's with the even? I don't know. That's the tone.
Because over the last
so I'm curious
years,
why.
You've already, as you just said, you'd seen this aesthetic, you kind of outgrown it. You were absolutely not excited about 9th edition.
No.
I think initially you were, but then it really I think it's honestly a combination of the story of putting a frog in a pot of water and then slowly turning up the heat. That's my analogy for 9th edition, right? It started off fine, but over the temperature kept getting turned up. And then next thing you know, we were in this boiling pot of water. And this is what Aaron and I ran into was I said, hey, instead of playing a board game, let's play a game of 40K. And he was like, there's a lot to go over there, and maybe we should just wait for 10th. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then 10th, got announced. I'm like, okay. And for me, 10th seems like a return to 8th where, all right, wait a minute, let's start over.
Right.
I hope we don't go out on this path again. I hope,
yeah.
At least not to this degree. Cause again, I think we were heading not quite as bad as 7th, but we were getting there.
Yeah.
And so my point there, long story short,
right. Yeah.
You were so down on 9th edition, you weren't interested. I'm not interested in recording anymore, blah, blah. Okay, cool. Jody's out of 40K. It was in my head. Right. Jody's out. He's out. He's done. I'm selling my orcs.
Right. Which I still am, but that's done. Not related to
We'll put a link to that on the show notes if you really want to unload them. Beautiful orcs. If I were going to do orcs, I would buy them. I just can't take on another army.
It's a pretty big army, and I'm not wanting to part it out.
My years of 40K have now matured me to the point of, okay, I'm not taking on yet another army.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, it was tempting. but
so you're saying there's a chance.
So the even Jody's excited about it is Jody was out. Jody's willing to give it another go.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's where I'm coming from. I don't know.
For me, it's very similar in that I think you were the first person to throw in the towel on 9th.
Yep.
And it's honestly
In the group. Yeah.
Totally fair.
Looking at 10th and what it brings to offer, it's no surprise that it would be a game that you're interested in playing. And it was more to Carl's point of like Jody's just out of 40K. But part of that is just, threw in the towel first. And now with the new edition, honestly, everything I've seen, I'm super excited about it. I'm way more excited than I've been in years for 40K. And so that part does not surprise me that you're into it. And it's just more getting back into 40K after taking such a deep plunge in D&D and Blitz Bowl. And
yeah. I mean, this is not my first edition go around. That's why I was like, you guys know I've done this a bunch of times and skipped 7th and came back and was perfectly happy with that. So, I think the boiling water one is pretty apt. I think my frog was ready to get out of the pot a lot sooner than everybody else's.
Yeah, you have a lower threshold for the temperature, I think.
Yeah, I was
I'll put up with a lot of pain for a while.
Before it's long story short, and then we can move on from this. I was just curious because everybody's like, "Whoa, he's going to play again." I'm like, I was always going to play again in my mind, but
that's news to me.
Okay, yeah, and that's fair. Yeah, no, I was like, otherwise I would have got rid of all my stuff, but it was just the too long to get the game on the table.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited that's what I was looking for. Was like, yep, when the game hard resets, I'll be back.
Fair enough.
So, and here we are.
So when we went around the horn last episode, we all kind of said what we're focusing on. So for you, what's the army of focus for 10th edition? At least initially.
Ooh. Initially,
it's not orcs.
No, the orcs got to go. They are creating a mental block for me, which is no good. They are spores making me unhealthy. I have a demon project that really, really needs it. It's only got 3 out of 4 prongs, and Papa Nurgle has sat neglected for far too long. So at least that will be to start. Thankfully, those projects go really quick. There was a small Iron Warriors project I was working on that. The longtime friends of listeners will remember I was like, it's just a kill team. And either Adon or Aaron or both gave me a hard time. I'm like, sure it is. Yeah, it's a really cool paint scheme. I think I could go back to that. So it'll be Papa Nurgle to get us going. Now that Justin's going another direction, somebody else has to catch it.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, and I will say, I put up my poll. It was going to be Sisters, Black Legion, or Tyranids. A lot of good feedback, but Black Legion pretty much won it strongly on the poll, so that's what I'm going to do. I mean, I do have a Sisters army I will get to at some point, but I'm going to focus on getting the Black Legion up. It's been a long-term project that I wanted to do. I've got some models painted that I'm very happy with. The Terminators in particular, I'm super happy with, so Black Legion for me.
I know you'll enjoy all of those projects at some point, but I think that's where your true heart lies anyway. Yep. So I'm glad the community reflected.
And Shell, we had a discussion about it. She's like, I think you should do Black Legion, or and I'm like, but you're gonna do Night Lords.
So one of the
we should divide it up a little bit. And she's like, no.
Different love about chaos, and really love is everybody in your game group could be playing chaos. And
there's a legitimate reason for them all to be fighting each other.
There's a legit reason they'd all fight each other, and it won't feel samey.
No,
almost ever.
No.
If everybody's playing Marines, it gets pretty samey pretty fast.
Yeah.
Yep. Even with all the cool new bling that's out there, it starts feeling pretty samey. And chaos, it makes sense, and you get to all forge your own narrative. And so I'm all for that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean, I had that huge Ultramarines army for a while that I sold to AJ. I have the Minotaur's army that I bought. That's the Forge World one that was in the books and everything. And originally I was going to do a bunch of Minotaurs, Primaris Marines and this, that, and the other thing. And I just really came to the realization that although Marines are fun, it's just not where my real love is. And honestly, my real love is chaos. So
Yep.
Embrace it.
Although I like the Sisters are so cool.
Yeah, I am very glad I have my old school Sisters army. Those Sisters are protecting me.
Yeah,
those old ones are saving the day.
And we talked about you already.
Yep.
Finish up Necron stuff, and then what?
Oh, just what I'm focusing in general. More immediately than even the Necron stuff is going to be the Primaris contingent of the Shark.
The Shark ones, yeah.
Working of getting that up to a boarding action size, and
Yeah.
then pretty immediately into a full scale 40K size force that's painted, ready to go.
Right on.
And part of me, I'm waiting to see how 10th edition does change. Like, now I can put Primaris Marines in a Land Raider, so that's a big chunk of points right there.
That's a huge
Yeah.
Again, Marines are not and it's so funny because I know they support Marines a lot. It's a big money maker, and every time they do sound like, oh well, but now I've got a lot of Land Raiders.
You do.
I have so many models for that army already painted, but now if I can feel like it's okay to cross the streams and not cause the end of the world, then
it's a precursor to doing out with the first one.
100%. Yeah. But from a gameplay standpoint, I'm also excited about that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Speaking of gameplay standpoint, let's talk games played. I have not played any GW games recently, 40K notwithstanding. My kid came down from UW for Mother's Day. We flew him down to spend time with their mom, and their mom wanted to play some board games, so we played some Merchants of the Dark Road and something else. But we love that game. You introduced us to it.
I got to play that last week too.
That's a favorite of ours. So all I did was a few board games, but we're coming to a tipping point here where Shell and I are going to start doing some GW stuff. So let's start with you, Josh.
Yeah. So one GW game played. Did play a couple board games also, but I am have been participating in a narrative spec ops kill team campaign out of Herrick Games in Santa Cruz Mountains. It's been kind of a slow and sort of steady progression of the campaign.
We call that a slow burn.
It's for being a store campaign, and there's been a lot of kind of pauses, and the interest has ebbed and flowed. I'll be kind of surprised if the thing actually comes to completion, but I've been enjoying playing some kill team. It's Into the Dark specifically, so that's been a lot of fun. I'm playing Sharkadons as a intercessor team, which is primarily assault intercessors, which just having them run around in a in the Space Hulk, where they're not getting shot up a lot, makes them a way more just fun and viable option. Lots of good charges and just brutal combats.
Cool.
It's been really enjoyable. So I played one of the games for that earlier this week against a local guy named Nathan. And he was playing Gene Stealers, so it was Gene Stealers versus Marines in a Space Hulk, which is pretty thematic.
That works. Classic.
Yeah. So it was fun. I do really enjoy Kill Team, but I have yet to have a game that hasn't been really lopsided one way or another.
Okay.
And that's maybe in the last 6 games or so I've had. I've probably more than doubled every opponent's, in some case maybe quadrupled their score in the last 4 to 6 games.
Oh, look who's so good.
Nice
humble brag.
I didn't think that was that humble.
I've only seen some lopsided one way. I just keep decimating my opponents.
But outside of the campaign, I played a game against Sky, and he was playing Dire Avengers, and I was playing Assault Intercessors, and I was shot off the table before I could do anything. Yeah. So I've been on the other side of that too. I'm just
very swingy.
Into the Dark helps assault teams in general, but
that makes for fast games.
Yeah. I haven't had a game of that yet that's been super close to the point that I'm like, yes, that was.
I guess the question to address that is, and let's take the Dire Avenger versus your, what were they?
Sharkadons, the Assault Intercessors.
Okay, the Assault Intercessors. After getting shot off the table, could you look at the situation and go, well, if I had done X differently, it may have been a different result?
Part of that was trying to remember how the cover rules work in that, because Kill Team does cover very differently from anything else 40K and any other GW game, period. So had I been more conservative with conceal orders and a little bit of cover, and these guys are just not a valid target. We were not playing Into the Dark on that one, so that was the Sector Mechanicus open war zone. So there was less cover in general, and I did learn from that game, and could have done things differently. So
I mean, the point of my question is, if you were like, I don't know that there's anything I could do differently against this army, then that's a fundamental problem with the game. But it sounds like, no, it's not necessarily that. It's just I'm still learning, or maybe taking a different approach might have resulted in a different outcome.
It's also a more extreme matchup. You have an incredibly shooty team and an incredibly salty team, and it's going to tend to go one way or the other pretty extremely. I think every matchup. So,
Okay. All right.
Well, I'll jump in because I'm supposed to on the notes, and my first thing is actually Kill Team. I'll be honest, I did try out the new Kill Team. Cliff and I made a whole day of it over in Santa Cruz and just played, I don't know, half a dozen games, I think. Just really had like, let's try it out. He was really excited about it. Man, did I bounce off of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, really did preferred the last version, warts and all, to the new one.
Interesting.
And part of it was the cover rules, as you mentioned, that like you guys were talking about Warcry last go round, and like Warcry seems to have a real clear understanding of being what it is. Like it's a, for lack of a better term, beer and pretzels game. It's, you bust it out, you play a few games. If they go lopsided, you're like, whatever. It was still fun to roll some dice and see what happened, and you rack it and go again. And it's your investment's pretty small. Kill Team did not feel that way to me at all. It was a more detailed kind of tactical firefight.
Yeah.
And if that's what you want, rock on. Love that. But I wanted Warcry of 40K. I wanted fast
it's
and
not
light,
that.
and it's really not. And I was genuinely bummed because I was like, oh, that was my like, I'm going to jump back in and get excited about this is going to be my catalyst to. Nope.
But no. Okay.
Man.
Fair enough.
So, I kind of had a similar experience, and all of our games were very swingy, and we were learning it. And I was like, oh, it was because we were learning it. The last two games we played, we like co-played through the game, and it still was very lopsided.
Interesting.
And user error and whatnot. Let me see what else we got going on.
Let me ask a quick question.
Yeah.
We could jump back to Space Hulk and Adepticon.
Yeah.
What did Aaliyah think of it?
She really liked it. In fact, I would say probably my first like get my feet back into GW models. I have a couple things I'm looking at before I really do the thing.
Yeah.
One is I really want to move away from my Necromunda gang that was a occultist gang.
Yeah.
They feel very, and also ran to play them. So I have an Orlok gang. Very excited. The other thing I'm excited to paint is all of the hybrids and whatnot for Space Hulk, because Aaliyah enjoyed it so much. She was like, yeah, I'd totally play that again.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because as a board gamer, it was very like, there's the mission. This is how it works.
Got it.
It was funny. She did say, she was like, I don't know, do the Marines really need to be that restrictive in how they move around? I was like, it kind of do, but but I don't know, maybe not, because they tend to get used throttled.
Yeah.
No, she had a great time, really enjoyed it, and was like, wait, you have that? Let's go. We should bust that out.
And you're like, yes, but what we have is not quite this, and it's played a little bit differently.
Right.
And yeah,
I think I showed her a picture.
Those guys run such a great narrative event.
Yeah.
They're pushing you,
but
they're not trying to curb stomp you. They want to see you succeed, but if you're going to fail, Josh, they're going to let you fail.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there, man. My whole team made it to the middle.
Yeah, mine. Well,
and Shell was
two
right
out of
there.
7 of my guys made it to the middle.
Shell was right in front of me. She was throwing stuff at me.
I've played a lot of 3rd edition, and I then misremembered one of the rules for lurking specifically, so a bunch of Gene Stealers just came in right in the middle of my team.
That's the thing, man. It is unforgiving.
Destroyed me. So.
Yeah, when it goes, I had some Shell. For every celebration you had with you, I had the like stupid power fist. Oh, I rolled a 6. Oh, I killed that Gene Stealer. And it just derailed the Congo line of death. And I had 2 of those. So really? I got very lucky.
Well, I'm glad Aaliyah enjoyed it.
Yeah, she had a blast.
It was Shell's first game playing Tyrannid. So I just wanted to fuel the fun for her. So I was just feeding the machine, taking one for the team.
Well, and she had the Black Templars, who are a lot of fun because they get in and just carve it up with the way, because they have cool characters that they've built, which I think is a great addition to the game.
Tyranids against
Aaliyah was playing. Yeah, Aaliyah was playing the Black Templars, which are a lot of fun, kind of like the Ultramarine Chaplain. You just push them in, which I think is, of all their many additions, I think that's my favorite thing, is that they have chapter specific characters and things they've added. I think it adds a ton to the feel of it.
Each team plays fairly differently with a lot of flavor.
Yeah, I knew that Inquisitor team. I've seen people get locked up there on the top level every time, and so I'm like, I gotta just run out. Yeah. Oh, two of my guys made it.
That's what's more Inquisitor than that. Sorry, guys. It was awesome. I got stuff to do. Speaking of each team being small but still being narratively satisfying, I have played a few games of Blitzball, and I'm going to be running a Blitzball event at Kubla, and then I will stop talking about Blitzball.
That's fine.
And I don't know if this still counts as GW or not. Aaliyah and I have played a tremendous amount of Hero Quest. So for those of you who are old and grognardy like me, I Does it count? I don't think it counts anymore.
I think GW just helped drive it. I think it was Milton Bradley that originally.
And now it's Avalon Hill.
But it did drag a lot of people into Games Workshop.
Sure.
And so
guaranteed.
We're going to say it counts.
Hell yeah.
It was part of my gateway drug into the hobby.
There you
into
go.
The hobby.
All right.
Yeah, but that's it. But yeah, like we keep saying, like very excited to return back to Necromunda, that and get some of the old classics back out and
very cool
and get those models and juices going.
Very cool. Very cool. And then the last thing I'll throw in there, which isn't in the notes, is we've been talking today about, we've been getting a lot of suggestions from the community. Oh, we want to see this, we want to see that. And some people say, oh, we want to see you stream games. And I'm like, well, okay, that's a whole different animal to stream games or even do battle reports that have an icy spin on it, meaning it's different than, there's great guys out there doing this stuff that are doing it at a level that is phenomenal. But I think what we're going to do, and we were talking about this earlier, is Shell, who wants to get back into 40K, like she's actually pushing me, is like, when it launches, when 10th Ed launches, we have to have a game day here. Everybody plays. We'll video a bunch of that. We'll get a bunch of video, a bunch of interviews, a bunch of, hot takes and that kind of thing. And then we'll put out a video around that. And I think it'd be fun to have a big group of people here again playing. So.
Yeah. I am actively avoiding spoilers, so I can't wait.
Cool.
Like I don't want to know I know nothing about 10th except
I know
that they're racking it. I'm very
it,
excited,
but I'm not like following every detail of every army game. Well, but I'm looking at the broad strokes.
You've done this enough times that you know that if you do that, you end up with the elephant in a small room issue or elephant in the dark, whatever that is.
People have already been freaking out about one particular army, AdMech, and they're like, oh, it's terrible. And it's like, you don't see you see 6 things out of a hole.
Yeah.
Let's let it breathe.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a short break. We're going to come back, and then we're going to get into the main topic of the show, which are these 40K rare items that we are going to talk about. So we will be right back. Welcome back.
Wow.
All right.
Coming in, huh?
A little out of practice. Welcome back. So we are now moving into the main topic of our show, which is rare 40K materials. And so we've each kind of picked a piece here that we want to talk about. Again, this is kind of, I think I label it as rare 40K materials 1, because I would like to do more of these if it lands. We'll see how it goes. But the item I chose to discuss is a reprint, actually, an improvement over a previous version. And that is the Sabbat Worlds Crusade. And originally this was released by Games Workshop, and I have the other version, but I can't find the date on it. And it was just a soft bound book, maybe 96, 120 pages, somewhere in there. Had a lot of information about the Sabbat Worlds, and I'll talk about what that is in just a moment. But this release is a 226-page book written by Dan Abnett. The previous one was written by Dan Abnett as well, but there's a lot more added here. It is so it is such a complicated. It's easily as complicated as writing a novel. It is like that involved. The amount of material in this book. It reminds me of old Forge World books, to be honest with you. So it's bound. This version is bound in this beautiful blue and copper gold covered thing. There's gold edging around the pages. The color plates inside of it are fantastic. The paper is fantastic. There's a bookmark associated with it. Like a ribbon bookmark in it. There's new art, new stories. This one came out in 2019, and this is actually not even the collector's version.
Oh, wow.
The collector's version of it is even a step above this. It's a different cover. It came with a number of challenge coins and some extra prints, as well as a
slip
cover. Yep. Yep. You hear that, Adon?
Yeah.
And
we were all thinking it.
And it is gorgeous. And I actually kind of regret not buying the special edition one now, but this has been a great book. So what is the Sabbat Worlds Crusade? This is the area of the 40K universe that the Gaunt's Ghosts series and several of Dan Abnett's books take place in. And the Black Library group guys used to they used to jokingly call it the Daniverse because it was kind of his own area that he was exploring in timeline that wasn't necessarily caught up to where 40K was, maybe a little bit in the past, and he kind of explored that area quite a bit. And if you have not read the Gaunt's Ghost series, and Jody, I know you're a little bit of a literary snob.
I'll take it. It's fine.
You've told me as much.
Yeah.
You may not have, but I was never a huge fan of Imperial Guard when I first got into 40K. And my friend Kentaro was like, "Oh, you should really read these Gaunt's Ghost novels." And I'm like, I'm over here reading these Space Marine novels. I'm good. But when I had blasted through all the Space Marine novels at the time, because Black Library did not, it wasn't Black Library today.
Right.
Yeah. And I bought all the omnibuses and read through all those, and some were better and some were worse. I was left with, well, I guess I'll read some of this Gaunt's Ghost stuff now that you've been talking about. And holy smokes, was I hooked. Like I said, I don't even really like Imperial Guard. I appreciate them more now, and I appreciated that series in particular. And that series now spans like at least 10 books, but even more. There's like kind of spin-offs. There's actually a Sabbat Worlds collection where other authors have written about stuff in this area as well. I have that as well as a really good collection as well. So this book covers not just the Tanith, which are the Gaunt's Ghost fighting force, but it talks about the entire theater in which they're operating and what this crusade that they get kind of swept up in is really all about. So where you look at the novels, the Gaunt's Ghost novels, and you're getting kind of a ground level view of what it is to be an Imperial Guardsman, and not just like these guys. Of course, these guys aren't like just Joe Imperial Guardsmen. These guys are like an elite fighting force of Imperial Guardsmen that are specialized in certain tactics and like, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. Where that you're getting kind of like a ground level view of what it's like to be a soldier in this kind of thing and the relationships between all these people. This book steps way back from that. And it's almost like an encyclopedia read of here was the crusade and here's everything it encompasses. So it takes like a 10,000 foot view.
Right.
And it does talk about the ghosts and Colonel Commissar Gaunt and what led to his ascension to that unique rank and but it's also kind of a small part. It also talks about the chaos forces that they're fighting in this theater and what they're doing there and why they're there. And it's really, really a fascinating read, especially like it almost goes hand in hand with the Gaunt's Ghost series.
Would you say that like the novels themselves, the narrative fictions are like a tactical view of the events, and then the Sabbat World Crusade is like a strategic view of it?
That is exactly correct.
Okay.
That's a really great way of looking at it.
Is it written from a historical perspective? Like this has been found after the fact?
Yeah.
And, okay. So that's a cool angle to take.
It's a very Forge World way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Right. Like Forge World would do the same thing with Vrax and those kinds of things where it's taking like a high level view. It'll occasionally focus down on a few key things. It talks about here are the key players in the area. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And it looks at it from this is what the Crusade was all about. It's almost future history, as Jeff and I used to call it. Right. So the book is broken down into 6 or 7 different sections. And I just want to briefly kind of give you an overview of what each of those sections kind of encompasses. And when the book starts off, it really does kind of start off around showing here's Ibram Gaunt, because I mean, he's kind of the central focus of the books. And this being said, I would say read the books before you would ever read this thing, because spoilers will abound in this piece.
Or instead of.
Okay, but that's like reading Wikipedia to see what happened in Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back and Return.
But if you're never going to watch Empire.
All right, anyway.
He also doesn't like Star Wars.
Oh, God. Okay.
It's weird that you let me sit here.
Yeah.
Wow. A look of regret right there.
So it talks about, initially, the overview, it talks about Ibram Gaunt, and then it talks about the Tanith first, which is really the group that the books primarily follow. But then it talks about the entire campaign is broken down in 7 phases spanning years 754 to 792. So it's like a 45, 46-year period. And phase 1 is really kind of a historical context of the Sabbat worlds. What, where they are, what are all the worlds in relation to each other, that kind of thing. And this is a huge area. Like, this is a crusade that involves a war master, not a Space Marine war master, but a war master Macroth to begin with, and thousands of ships and millions of men and all of this to go deal with basically chaos incursions in this area. There is awesome artwork in this book. Artwork I had never seen before too. In particular, there's on the cover of the book is what's called the Sabbat Aquilus. And there's like multiple versions of this. There are different badges that are on people. So it's really, really in depth in that regard. And then there's this beautiful picture of the Beatty, right? Which is also, she's called the Saint. And this is kind of Dan Abnett's Celestine, right? She has these crazy powers. She has these abilities. People are following her. I don't want to throw out a lot of spoilers for people who haven't read the series. I would say just read it. She is effectively like kind of Saint Celestine. And what it is it's the Emperor's, hypothetically, the Emperor's manifestation of his power through a central figure.
Yep.
But there's some beautiful art of that. There's pictures like in Forge World books of soldiers and equipment that they, would utilize in the different uniforms, because there's lots of different forces involved in this whole area. It's not just the Tanith. The Royal Volpoin, the Hurricane 8th, the Urdeshi Stormtroopers, all this stuff. And then a few Space Marines are involved. But the great thing about this series is like, in particular the novels themselves, is Space Marines are not the central focus of this. And they shouldn't be, right? If there's only 1,000 Space Marines per chapter and they're so rare, like a lot of these guys have never seen a Space Marine.
Right.
And so when a Space Marine actually shows up, they're like, holy smokes, what is that?
Right.
Like the Space Marine video game. I don't know if you remember that, with like the Imperial Guardsmen that are there, which should be the majority of 40K should be Imperial Guard.
It is.
But just that neat little audio interaction of like, oh my God, it's a Space Marine, like Emperor be praised. Like, because somebody actually seeing a Space Marine should be super rare. And
they would think like one Space Marine is going to wipe out 1 million orcs. Right? In their heads, that's what they're built up as. So, and then this section ends with the Crusade Charter, and it's literally written out like what the Crusade's objective is, and it's made to all look like an actual document and stuff. It's a fantastic intro to the book. Phase 2 contains accounts of several of the battles and a detailed discussion of kind of the arch enemy, which is the term they use to represent the chaos forces, right? The arch enemy. And in particular, it's led by Anarch Sec, kind of becomes like one of the main leaders of the arch enemy. But there's this beautiful picture that they've shown, which is and the thing is, they'll show like this picture and they're like, oh, this is a painting that was done of the arch enemy and these members of it. And the painting, we think it was done by this person, so it's like, it's treating it like a real thing. But there's this amazing picture of like kind of the chaos leaders in the book here in this section, which includes Anarch Sec, Magister Sholan Skara, Magister Inoketi, Heritor Asphodel, etc. Like, it's just like, and you look at that artwork and you're like, I want to know more about these villains. Like, they're fantastic. Phase 3, again, even more battles are detailed, and in particular here now it starts talking a little more about the Tanith, the Gaunt's Ghost Group, and what they're involved in. More artwork, including I don't want to say that because that's kind of spoilers, so I'll leave that one out. But and for those who have read the Gaunt's Ghost series, this is where rivals for the War Master, and this kind of is not much of a spoiler, but there's like this point where the War Master is basically on his deathbed, and the great thing about the book is like it's showing like all the political machinations around who wants to be War Master next, who doesn't want to be War Master. Right. who's trying to push for other people to be War Master. Some people want Gaunt to be the War Master, etc. And so there's like a lot of discussion about that in this particular section. Phase 4 talks about discussions about other dangers in the Sabbat worlds, whether that's the Aldari or the Orc, or, and I love that they have taken the term artificial intelligence and they refer to it as abominable intelligence. So it's still AI. We may be getting closer to that than we realize right now.
I love that we live in the future.
More nefarious.
Yeah. And then phase 5 introduces kind of the new chaos group that comes in called the Blood Pact. And these guys are awesome in the series. If you haven't read it, they are awesome. There's excellent images of the soldiers, the officers, the equipment they use, and auxiliary forces, where they utilize Xenos breeds to help fight with them and stuff. It's Dan Abnett is truly one of the better writers, and as everybody knows, that Black Library has, and he shows that his breadth of knowledge about 40K, and not just what he knows, but how he forges new things for 40K.
Right.
The Vox is something that he literally created out of nowhere, and everybody knows what a Vox is.
Yeah. Right.
Phase 6 talks about the primary front and the battles that are going on there. And then phase 7 talks about the road to Urdesh, which is one of the final kind of conflict areas. But also, there's tons of, and Jeff would love this, because there's tons of plates that are very reminiscent of the Forge World books, where it shows like here's a rhino, here's a land raider.
I love those.
I love it too.
I love them.
Yeah.
I see what Jeff used to say in the Forge World books, where he'd be like, yeah, but how many different rhinos do I need to see a pattern of? Fair enough. It doesn't quite go into that depth. And then you see just a huge number of plates, amazing photos of, or images of Gaunt, the ghosts, the silver snakes, where they land at this point, at the end of the series that they've reached so far. As far as I know, he's probably still going to write some more stuff for it. So it's never the end, but this book gave me a tremendous appreciation for the novels and the amount of thought that Dan has taken in writing them and then expanding upon this. Like
this is almost his Similarian, like.
Yeah, to a degree, it's an interesting view on world building. Like if you're into like role playing and that kind of stuff, he has just carved out a section of the 40K universe, turned it into the Daniverse,
right,
and written it in such a way that other authors were then tasked to, hey, go write stories under these parameters within this section of the Sabbat worlds and what's going on with your thing. And there's a huge novel around it where other Black Library authors literally took his world that he created and added to that. And I think it's, for me, very interesting to see where the Warhammer 40K universe is so large and diverse, you can literally carve out a section of it and make it even more unique and interesting. And it just gives you a sense of just the scale of 40K and how big it is. This was a lot of guys that are involved in that, and then nobody really knows much.
Well, that's like hitting all the greatest hits of what is the 40K lore at a meta kind of level. That you have that future history aspect, in any really good fantasy science fiction, you get that grit, that like there is a past here that has led to today, even though we're telling a story today. Yeah. When you watch Blade Runner, you have a sense of what happened to get you to that moment.
Right.
Or Alien or Predator, or any of those are, science fiction, other science fictions that really resonate with me. You have that, and you mentioned Tolkien, same deal. Like he was obsessed with that stuff. So you've got that. Then you have this unknowable scale.
Yeah.
And then within that, you can zoom in and take a minute and go, this impossible scale, this 40-year-long crusade that we're going to zoom right down and look at one guy and one group of guys. But then we can also pull that lens all the way back. That scale that is unknowable, to get to piece through it to a point where you know it, and you're right there in it. That's all the good stuff. That's the juice, I think, of the really wonderful 40K lore. And I mean, that's like it distilled down to a book.
And the thing about, I've always loved the Forge World books. I've been a huge fan of them. And in the past, I've compared, like, the lore in the Codex feels very much like a comic book.
Yeah.
Whereas the Forge World books felt more like a gritty, dark, what I feel like it takes it a little more seriously. At least that was how I always felt. This feels very much like a Forge World book. I would be surprised if the people who put the Forge World books together for their quality and the way it's laid out didn't do this book. In fact, I can find out. I should have found out before this because I know exactly who to ask to find out. But, but I'm so glad I bought this book. Like I've kind of backed off of buying a lot of collector's editions of things because I just have a ton of it sitting around. I also have the map of this area that's rolled up and sitting a tube and in its box still. And it's like, why am I buying this stuff that's just sitting on a shelf, or in this case, in a cupboard closed off? This is a book that I do not regret owning ever, and I still go back to occasionally. And as more books about Gaunt's Ghosts or that area come out, I can use it as a reference guide also to understand, like, oh, here's where it sits in the greater scheme of things. And it's just a beautiful piece of artwork to have.
Yeah, it's a great object. I mean, there's an amount of that with these rare, lore and books and things that when you brought up this idea, it was like that was one of the things I definitely thought about, was like the object itself having some merit. And that, the Sabat World Crusade book is a beautiful object.
I think it's greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Right.
Yeah. The production value is amazing on it, but it's also kind of a neat thing of that it's an atlas to this system, and even though you can really zoom into a single character in this system, in the big picture, that whole system is a speck of dust in the grand scheme of the galaxy, which is pretty near the universe.
Yeah. And Games Workshop may reprint this at some point. I mean, they tend to do that sometimes. Currently, the value of this book, as I was looking online, like on eBay, I saw the collector's edition one, which was a little more than this one, was running at about $300 on eBay. This one would probably fetch $120, $150, I think. That was a collector's edition, still in shrink wrap. Right. So, I mean, it's a book I keep. I wouldn't sell it. It's not worth selling for me. It's something I want. It was funny, though, as we were talking about collecting things, like I have the collector's edition of the Ahriman book that just came out a year or so ago. And it comes with all this crazy stuff in a box and whatnot. And Adon had reached out to me. He was working at Games Workshop at the time. He says, hey, we got one of these in. Do you want it? I'm like, no, I don't want it. Like, I love John and all. I got some of these collector things. And he's like, well, they're selling out super fast. And I go, let me look. And I looked at it online. I go, oh, no. All right, fine. I'll take it.
Fine.
Hold it for me. I'll come by. And there are still certain key collectors things I'll buy. But I think Games Workshop also does, like, oh, here's this collect special edition codex. I'm never going to buy a special edition codex for any particular reason again. Like I just tossed out a bunch of codexes because they're never going to get used again.
Yeah, you go through them too quick.
Yeah, you go through them too quick. But this is a book that's kind of timeless. I'll keep it.
Well, it does, kind of what you were saying, Josh, of that it gives you, it's a cool artifact. It looks rad. It's got art that you haven't seen anywhere else. I mean, just in flipping through it before we recorded, or in between segments there, I was like, oh, this is the thing. Like, anytime you see something like that and you're immediately excited to go, I wanted part of that.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things I both love and missed about 40K was finding that groove where it's like, I get to pick where I want to engage with this limitless universe or galaxy, and I mean, that's a great example of, do you want to play Ghost and the Tanith? Yeah, do that. Do you want to play some unknown group of Schenectadian knuckleheads, and there they are, and play them?
Yeah. If I were going to roll, and the other opportunity with something like this is if I were going to run Only War, which was the RPG which is kind of based on,
oh man,
right?
Oh, I know where you're
individual kind of units for Imperial Guard guys doing special missions and that kind of stuff. This provides like a great source book of material that you can be like, oh, well, I'm going to put them in the Sabat worlds, and here's what I'm going to do with that, as opposed to the campaign world that they've provided, or the campaign section that they provide. You could lift and shift this over to here fairly easily. And
yeah,
Yeah.
we should do that.
let's do Dark Heresy first. And we'll come
Okay,
back.
let's do that.
But this would be very cool for that.
Yeah.
So, okay. So we've gone through mine. I think what we're going to do is, and I recognize it's a short piece of segment. I think we're going to take a short break here. Then we're going to come back and we're going to cover both items that you guys have brought to the table, and we'll see how that goes. So we'll be right back. All right, and we are back. And next up, in our discussion around collectible and rare 40K items, Josh, we're going to talk about something that's probably not a lot of people remember who are playing right now.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how many people identify with it. So to reveal the curtain, what I chose was the 2nd edition Assassin's Codex.
Assassin's Codex, you say? Is
Yes.
that even a thing? Not now.
I think it's a White Dwarf article now, or maybe even a community page PDF.
I think it's an entry in the Space Marine Codex.
I don't even think they're in.
Assassins are somewhere, but anyway.
Yeah, the last publication I recall of Assassins was a White Dwarf article. It was 2 pages. Here's
But they
your
used to
rules.
have their own codex.
Yep. And it's been diminished over the years with new editions and as things have changed or simplified and etc. It's evolved or devolved depending how you look at it quite a bit. But 2nd edition was where I got into the game, and Assassins always had a cool element to them. So this one, I have very fond memories of reading this book late hours at night. So I wanted to bring it back into the spotlight here.
Can I ask you a question about this right off the bat, just to kind of get us started, which is, so in 40K now, you have like basically 4 different types of assassins.
Yep.
How could you make a whole codex or a whole army around that? Like how would that even work? I don't think it would work today.
So it's still not a whole army. So
Okay.
they still worked similarly from a rules perspective as they do today, in that they are going to be a supplement to a force that you are bringing.
Got you.
There are some scenarios, some narrative scenarios in there of kind of suggestions in the back more than actual like spelled
Hard
out
and fast,
rules.
yeah.
Hard. But it's basically here's one assassin against a horde of guys, and like here's an idea for that, or here's an assassination attempt that you're going to set up when you're going to have a bodyguard to get through and things like that. So there are some narrative suggestions in there of how to run it, but they functionally, from a rule standpoint, worked back then similar to how they are today. In that if you're playing an Imperial faction, you could bring a number of assassins, generally limited to 1. To the table with you, and you would choose from one of the 4 temples, and then each of those assassins has a very unique flavor of how they play on the table and then the lore behind them. And one of the reasons I chose this book is because it goes into so much more depth of that lore, of what these different temples do, what's unique about them, more of the behind the scenes, which is really, I would say, watered down, or it's more of the Cliff Notes version in today's publications of what assassins are versus what it used to be. This is kind of the original. Here's everything, and then we're going to just distill and refine.
It all originated from this book that you're talking about.
To my knowledge, assassins probably existed in Road Trader. Jody could talk to that.
Yeah, but I think the first real delve into the depth of that you're talking about was the 2nd edition codex.
that's what I'm recalling when this generation of models came out. When the real kind of lore behind them and more just in-depth integration into the game.
Okay.
Yeah, they were definitely there, and there were like ally percentage rules and stuff, but the houses or the
Temples.
excuse me. My goodness, one's going to come for me now. The various temples, I don't think they got codified until this codex.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
Interesting.
And Rogue Trader was a very different game from 2nd
Yeah,
edition,
it was
which is a very different game from every other.
I was going to say, like, the suggestions you're talking about in the back don't really translate now to how the game is played. Like, the game has gone through an evolution to the point where it's not even its core mechanics are not even the same.
Yeah. I'll touch on that a little bit too.
Okay. And then the other interesting thing that you brought up that I hadn't, and honestly, I guess I sort of knew this, but I didn't really think about it, was back then you would get a codex, which was really, as you said, a supplemental codex. Like we don't really do that so much anymore. They kind of went
Just
back to it a little bit
Space Marine
with
chapters.
Space Marine chapters. But back then, like the interesting thing about this, they could throw in like just a small contingent of, not Death Watch, the Ghost Space Marines.
Lost in the Damned. Wrong book.
Wrong.
Legion of the Damned.
Legion of the Damned.
Yep.
I couldn't.
It was on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah, I mean, I have a whole unit of them painted up. Legion of the Damned would have been such a great, oh hey, and we're just gonna add this, and it can only be this little. I mean, that's a really fantastic idea, and but as I was just complaining about 9th edition and all the layers getting added onto it, I mean, I think that also creates a bit of sprawl that you start to have problems with. I don't know what the answer there is other than digitally provide all the content.
Right. Well,
but even there,
it also is a little different when one of these came out every quarter.
Yeah.
So
more than that. I mean,
also the length of this one was less of an issue.
Yeah. But there were periods where armies didn't get codexes for years.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Years.
Decade.
Yeah.
In one case, at least.
In one case, yeah. All right. So anyway, sorry to interrupt, but
yeah. So I'll just go over the bullet points here of it. So this released in 2nd edition, as we said. This was 1997. So this is towards the tail end of 2nd edition.
Okay.
There are a few names we might recognize on this cover and book in general inside. Andy Chambers was one of the co-writers for the rules.
Hey,
friend of yours.
Friend of yours.
If only.
And Jess Goodwin did not only some art, but also did the sculpts for the models. And the 2nd edition sculpts were phenomenal. I still have many of my 2nd edition. The only models I have left from 2nd edition are the assassins, because they've just loved them from then. They've obviously all been updated to the new plastic since then.
Wow, they've held up almost 30 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. They've been around for a while. Yeah, so to the point we covered, this was actually pretty unique in that it was a codex, but it was more of a supplement than a codex, because there are only 4 models that this codex covers,
right?
Instead of an entire army range. Although 2nd edition, to be fair, was a much smaller game as far as available units and things like that. So even your Space Marine codex at the time had 15 units.
It is funny to look at like old White Dwarf articles, and they're like, oh, this guy posed with his army, and he's like got his arms on the table, and he's got his head resting on his arm, and the army's in front of him with its goblin green bases, and you're like, it's like 25 models.
20 models in a tank was a full-size game.
That's right. Yeah. That's exactly right.
Which, and I'll get into the depth of that a little bit more. So this one is pretty unique in that it contains, it has both the history and the ritualized training methods for each of the 4 temples. And it does mention there are additional temples. So there's 4 main assassin temples.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. But there are a bunch else out there that are not necessarily named. A few are named. And there's an interesting little full circle tidbit on that, which I'll get to in a second.
Okay.
So first, we'll start with the art of death. So this is how assassins become assassins, basically. So training starts in super early childhood. They're chosen from the progeny of death worlds, feral societies, and the most dangerous hive cities. So it's like people who have, at a young age, at the young age of 4 to 5 years old, or how old you are, you've already survived atrocities, or you've already had to fight for your life just to survive. Right. So these are the people they're going for. Once you've made it past just surviving on whatever your environment is, then you're selected. You're thrown on a ship, and training starts immediately.
This sounds pleasant.
Yeah, you haven't even made it to the boat yet, and they're already culling the herd, if you will. There's just extreme conditions. Once they get to the ship, They throw everything at them. There's extreme gravity, no gravity, too much oxygen, no oxygen, blinding light, zero light, just every condition they can throw at them in the ship. And it's not uncommon for the potential candidates to when that ship actually lands on Terra, which is where the primary temples are and where training really is happening. That maybe 10% of the flock have survived to that point. Sometimes ships have landed and there are 0 candidates still alive on there. They have not passed the test. So
rare situation when
you're land, go back.
Yep.
Why couldn't I have been picked to be a Space Marine?
Right. Yeah. Oh, that sounds refreshing.
That'd be so much easier.
Yeah. So it's a pretty rigorous selection cycle. And then from there, the candidates, if there are any on the ships, are divided into any of the several temples at that point,
based on probably how their performance was.
Right.
Okay.
And and maybe there's natural proclivities to one type of combat or another, or they've done a lot of genetic testing and things like that, and they're like, okay, these guys are going to be more susceptible for these modifications.
Got it. Okay.
This technique, etc. So then we get into the lore from there, and the lore in the second edition codex, actually, it focuses pretty specifically on the age of apostasy, which is kind of the whole Imperium's just in chaos, not from chaos, but from the Imperium itself. It's just tearing itself apart. There's all these little rival fragments and renegade factions.
This is where you have lots of religions arrive.
Yes, and the ecclesiarchy and the administratum are just kind of dominating the scene and rooting everything, essentially. Yeah.
Typical.
What would that be like?
Yeah. From there, they the lore, and I'm not going to go into the full detail of the lore here, but it paints a very vivid picture of what the Imperium looks like at this moment. There's just rampant corruption. There is factions fighting within factions, lots of infighting, lots of just disorganization, lots of competition for power, for resources, etc. A lot of warlords trying to grab control. There's actually one particular character who I'll have to remember his name here.
Van Dyer. Van Dyer's Reign of Blood.
Yeah, he essentially usurps the Imperium from Terra itself.
Yep.
So he's placed himself at the head of both the Administratum and the Ecclesiarchy at the same time. So no checks and balances. He's the guy. Everything he says goes, and everybody hates him for it. This is probably the worst of the worst that the Imperium has ever seen, condition-wise, life, etc. It's a complete mess. Nobody's happy to be there. Everybody is trying to get rid of him let's set a new thing in motion here. So there's assassin temples that are being hired or utilized.
So has it gone into why the assassin temples were created to begin with, or
so it's a little convoluted in that the idea of the assassins temples, of what they publicly say, is to basically control peace and order in the galaxy.
Okay.
They're there to take out renegades,
the scalpel, if you will.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Xenos, etc. It's exactly that. It's the surgical scalpel going in to remove a problem, so for the betterment of the Imperium. And
this is really an approach to, we want to reshape the Imperium. We want to cut off the person who set themselves up as the head of it.
Right. Yes. And different temples have different approaches to that, which is pretty interesting. Like, I'll get into that a little bit more, but I can just, the Vindicare Temple, for example, is very much revenge focused. So if somebody's been wronged, they're being hired to take out one very specific target, maybe a bodyguard retinue, but it's very focused.
Okay.
And it tends to have something a little bit more personal to it. I'll say in modern 40K, assassins are only issued or given an assignment upon approval of the High Lords of Terra. So there's a kind of the 12 Lords of Terra are like, okay, this is a problem. We need an assassin. We give it the stamp. They choose the temple, and one assassin goes out. Okay. So there is a lot of bureaucracy to actually get an assassin out there in the field. So Vindicares, for example, are very just kind of revenge focused.
Do you think they have like a meeting where they're like, all right, we got 50 requests for assassins here. Let's go through these. And then they just sit down and go, yes, no, yes, no, yes.
It's the Imperium. There's an assassin, a rubber stamp.
But I mean, think about it. It's the 12 Lords of Terra have to decide on each assassin.
Right.
In a galaxy of billions. Yeah. There's probably thousands of assassins sitting ready.
Well, you were saying before of like the Sabbat Crusade being treated more historical.
Yeah.
And like a little more gritty. I mean, the assassin thing is the comic bookiest of comic book.
Yeah, right.
It's true. You know, it is,
right,
it is
really
the hyperest of elite. It's like Marines. There's like thousands of them.
Chums.
Here is a handful of these, mutated
Right.
killing machines. So yeah, if you want a hardcore comic book, as I'm looking down at it too, like is the most comic booky Wayne
It was a
Reynolds
very
cover
different
too.
time though. When it was created, it was a very different, like,
Hero Hammer.
not even just that, but I mean, like, there was a tongue-in-cheek aspect to it.
Yes.
That, the Forge World, in particular, in that writing and the writing in the Sabbat Crusade, like these are very different thematically written things. I mean, the Sabbat Crusade presents itself as almost a believable interpretation of what Warhammer 40K could look like, whereas this is like, and then there's these super ultra guys,
And they're like, send one for Carl.
That's right.
Marines are great, but
And then I send back his head.
let's turn this one up to 11.
Right.
that's
And then you get assassins.
Yeah, don't mean to interrupt, but I mean, I do mean to interrupt, I should say, because I did. But I don't mean to take our discussion in a different direction. But it is somewhat amusing that you're like, when you think about this logically, and people have done this with Marines, but this is even more so. It's only the High Lords of Terra can approve an assassination by one of these assassins. Okay. So there literally has to be like a weekly or bi-weekly meeting where they're like, sit down, we got to go through a bunch of these.
Or the degree of pain in the butt you have to be. Like, I mean, Van Dyer was like, I'm going to take over the whole empire.
Yeah, at that point, they're like, everybody's like, what do you mean we're only sending one?
But of course, at that point, he was one of the High Lords of Terra.
Right. So this is going to...
So a lot, because of his activity, a lot changed and was formalized, and extra layers of bureaucracy and all that have gone into motion because of him specifically, which is, I think, why they mentioned him in the lore section of this. Because there's not a ton of lore of just like world history at that point. It's more focused on just what the assassins do and how they do it, and then the rules for how they do it.
Yeah.
But it is really interesting because there's all this corruption in not only the High Lords of Terra, but everything else. So anyways, long story short, they assassinate him, or they send an assassin to him, but his bodyguards actually cut his head off in rebellion. He's got his own private bodyguard retinue, and everybody's just tired of him. So his bodyguards end up cutting off his head.
So what did the assassin play in this? The assassin showed up and they're just like, hang on.
Yeah. Well, like, oh, okay, somebody already rubber stamped this. Let's get it done. And so the bodyguard do the dirty work. But what really happens after his loss is the more important.
I picture this assassin showing up and just going, oh, but I had one job.
I got woken up for this.
All right.
So anyways, after his execution, the Imperium goes into an extra degree of chaos. There's nobody in charge. There's nobody steering the ship. It's a complete mess. It's falling apart at the seams. And that's because of his removal. Mm-hmm. The Imperium really has to come together and reform a lot of things. And the High Lords of Terra kind of really reestablish their whole system in order to make the Imperium a functional machine.
Right.
It's maybe not the best place
quote
to be,
unquote
but
functional.
yeah, exactly. They got to make Big Brother happen.
It's falling apart slower.
Yeah. In this time, there's a bunch of assassination attempts of the Grand Master Assassin, who is kind of the big head of the organization.
Who do you send to kill this guy?
So there's a lot of warring interests in people who want to be the Grand Master Assassin, and then there's also some political components that want to take over the Administratum or the seat on the temple. Or not the temple, sorry.
On the council
of Terra. So there's a ton of infighting and chaos. So anyways, out of all of this, there kind of forms the Imperium as we know it today.
Okay.
At the end of the day. So there's a whole mess. One of the just cool things that it pointed out in the lore, of one of the ways it presented the lore, was an autopsy report.
Oh, really?
Which is pretty neat. And this was between the Grandmaster Assassin and his head rival, who was kind of promised to be the next Grandmaster Assassin, but was out on an assignment for years, infiltrating in with Dark Eldar. And then when he comes back, he sees he's already been supplanted, so he's no longer
next in line. Yeah.
And because the lifespan of assassins and all that, at this rate, unless he kills the Grandmaster Assassin, he's never going to get that job. So there's this whole rivalry that gets set in motion. And the autopsy report is the Adeptus Medicae, kind of looking at it after the fact, and they have no idea how this guy died. Like essentially, he had massive head trauma and a heart attack simultaneously, and and then through the course of the lore, it actually explains how this worked. He used a biodegradable ammunition. A double shot thing, so it's basically a bullet to the brain and a bullet to the heart, but they're biodegradable, so they dissolve. There's no trace of them. There's no exit wounds.
Right.
So everybody, like the autopsy report, is like, I have no idea. This guy died terribly, but we can't.
I'm sure he's dead. That's about it.
Yeah, exactly. The old arm check.
That's so good.
WWE wrestling.
Yeah. So anyways, just the depth and detail of the lore and the way they approach it, it brings it all together full circle. And I know I've rambled a bit for how we got there, but it's just really fascinating to see how that just one person here made a difference, one person there made a difference, and how it's really one or two assassins kind of shaped the galaxy as we know it.
Yeah, and I think you touched on two key points there, which are really interesting. That I think one, how an individual, things can turn on the actions of an individual. Right now, mind you, it took probably a huge orchestration of people to agree to send this individual and a meeting at 11 a.m. on Wednesdays at the Heads of Terra to say, yes, okay, let's do this. But the other point you mentioned was that there were the four main temples, but they allude to these other temples and even name a few of them.
Yeah.
This is typical Games Workshop.
Yeah.
Right?
Wait, you said...
Go ahead. I was going to say,
you alluded to a little something.
You were going to come back to this.
Yeah, that was a good time.
Okay.
So, one of the temples that they mention is the Venom Temple.
Say it 3 times fast.
Venom Temple.
Okay.
Which I personally have never seen any other mention of it aside from that codex.
Yeah.
And there's never been rules or models for anything like that. Just a few months ago, Horus Heresy 30K came out with rules and models for the Venom Assassins.
No way.
So full circle, almost 30 years later.
That's pretty cool.
They're like bringing that old lore to life on the tabletop, which as soon as I read that, I was like, oh, well, yes, that's awesome.
That is really
which
cool.
is really cool to see.
Really, and this is, like I said, this is typical Games Workshop. Like, oh, there's 20 Space Marine Legions, 2 of them.
Yep.
You don't know their names. I mean, like, and that's intentional. I mean, let's leave it up to you to decide, or you to create, or just for your
this was
discussions like this
one line written in a book
30 years ago,
almost 30 years ago, has now turned into models, rules, full expanded lore, etc. So it's just
I wonder
time and space to grow.
who was looking at the book and they're like, hey, this one.
Yes. Yeah.
This one. Let's make
They
a
got to
model.
have an index of that stuff.
Oh.
They have to. So at the time, I will say from first person account, when I remember when this came out and we started busting out our very ninja looking first ed assassins.
Yeah.
I believe I still have mine somewhere. The other temples were like, oh, so you can still use this one because the original one doesn't look anything like the Vindicare Calidus, et cetera, et cetera. It's just generic assassin ninja guy because Hades, so it had to be a ninja.
Had to be a ninja.
Yeah, of course it did. But yeah, that's it. That is super cool. That like,
what an interesting jaunt through. And this is, as far as I know, the only place that some of this material is really covered. Like it kind of came and then went.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's so interesting that they come back to the Nominum assassin and bring him back. I mean, because again, one line in a book 30 years ago,
and here we are.
That's kind of
which is neat. So
nice way to bring it full circle.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Props to them for whoever did. Like, who's the guy who found that one line from 30 years ago and brought it to life now?
Yeah, very cool.
Good job. So I won't go into all the detail of the temples because that hasn't changed all that much. Yeah. But one thing I did want to touch on is just the rules in general. So I'm not going to go into any real detail, but second edition, rereading all the second edition rules to how 40K plays today.
Yeah.
Even, when 10th edition drops in a couple weeks. Second edition was so much more like Necromunda plays still. So much more depth, so many more options. You had gas weapons, you had blind weapons, all these things, and there are so many more layers. And the assassins were really specialized in their rules to take advantage of all these different options between their skin suits, their masks, the filters, the combat drugs they take, things like that. So rereading these old second edition rules just really hit me in that happy place for that level of
detail,
complexity, and detail. Because the original or second edition 40K, I would say, was more like a skirmish game compared to modern day 40K.
Yeah.
Not only in model count, but how it played out. There's just more depth, fewer models, more options.
You could not do that with as many models as in an
100%.
army today.
Yeah. And part of the game's evolution is to simplify, to make it more approachable, but it's also Games Workshop as a company. Like,
Sell more
the
models.
They can sell, the more profit they're going to make. So if they
I actually do not begrudge them that. Like, it's a business model. No pun intended. But like it listen, you got to make it a profitable product to sell and keep people buying, right?
Yep.
So,
yeah. So in a nutshell, that's second edition
That is
Assassins,
really cool.
and it was really, really fun taking that journey back down memory lane here.
that is really cool.
So the Sabbat World Crusade book weighed in at 230 pages, a little under that.
Yeah.
What are you sporting here, Josh? What kind of page count we talking about for the Assassin's Codex second edition? I only bring it up because it's
25.
All 25 pages for all of that.
Gold leafed, right?
Gold leaf, has a bookmark, hardcover. No, it's none of that.
Covered in contact poison.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's a soft cover. What did you equate it to? A religious
pamphlet.
So the hard copy I brought in here is actually the third edition,
Yeah.
which is only 8 pages, I think. It's 8 pages and 2 covers. So clearly just from even second edition, which had all that, the rules, complexity, things like that, and extra lore, to the next edition, only 2 years later, when the third edition book dropped, it's a third.
You know, I remember seeing this stuff
Yeah.
at the hobby shop
Yep.
when I would go, like, way back before I was into 40K. And I looked at 40K and I looked at the prices and that kind of stuff. Originally, I actually wanted fantasy models because I was playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, how much for those? But they're plastic, right? Because at the time, everything was metal.
Yep.
And I thought plastic must be inferior. Now, oh God, please don't give me a metal model.
No.
Right?
No.
But I remember seeing all these things at D&J Hobbies in Campbell, which was the
that's a
big
good shop.
hobby store.
Yeah.
That was a great shop. And I would see it and I'd think, wow, you know, it's so evocative. It's so interesting. I really wish I could get in this game. I do not have that kind of money at this moment. And I feel like I got in at a good time, but I missed some things that were so interesting, you know, that people were really, really excited about. So,
Right, when this was all brand new and
yeah.
you know, seeing that level of the bureaucracy get defined, which was a big part of second edition. Like that's when that whole aspect of the game and that bureaucracy got
You also
really
had
hashed
real
out.
just gamer fans making the game. Like, I don't know that the business model and the business acumen was there as
Right.
much as now it's a business. It's a multi-million-dollar international business. It has to follow certain, it's publicly traded. Like, so there's all these things, but at the time it was gamers doing games.
Right.
You know?
That was kind of the fan lore around Andy Chambers early on. Was he was a fan of Games Workshop that went on to shape the 40K universe, basically.
Yeah.
But you know, exactly as you said, it was just guys who were having fun and went, let's write this down.
Well, speaking of having fun and writing stuff down, let's talk about what you've brought here today, which is honestly something I had only seen one of these in person before meeting you, and you had both of them.
So this was a treat some years ago that adult-ish Jody bought for childhood Jody. And so what I brought, in contrast to the 25 pages, is in the combined roughly 300-page volumes each, the Realm of Chaos books.
Yeah.
Released in 1988, and then the second tome came out in 1990. Just for reference, Rogue Trader first edition 40K came out in 1987. So this was a year later.
Wow. Yep.
So these two books were written largely by Rick Priestley, father of 40K, and Brian Ansell, who is a name that if you haven't been at this for a while, you might not know.
I actually don't recognize that name.
Brian Ansell is as much the father of Games Workshop as anybody is. He gets that. He was one of the very original driving personalities behind the whole thing, in both fantasy and 40K. Now, these books are unique because they do flip-flop between, in fact, there's more dedication to the fantasy world than the 40K world. These 2 tomes are the penultimate defining work on the Chaos Gods. They go into excruciating detail at times. The interior of the books, just as I mentioned earlier, like the object, the interior of the books is like an ode to chaos. It is insane. It's Blanchitsu and Ian Miller art just everywhere. The pages have like that illuminated art lining the edge of just mutation after mutation.
So good.
Yeah, the fact it's actually printed on human flesh too is like really takes it to that level.
The price on that has gone up so high these days that you just can't do that sort of work anymore. It is as chaotic as you would want a book about the 4 different chaos gods to be. Much like anything from that era of gaming, D&D, whatever, it's a lot of black and white art, and there is no consistency from one piece to the next, which for these books is so wonderful and like fitting, gets the vibe of like something incredibly cartoony on one page, on the next something hyper realistic on the next.
Such a perfect marriage of weirdness.
Yeah. It's just, they're just strange. There's this young guy in there who does a lot of the art, and then the color palettes in the middle for some of those very early. His name's Jess Goodwin. I think he probably went on to do some stuff.
I heard of him.
Yeah. If you're of a particular era, these were the second book, Lost in the Damned, which covers Nurgle and Tzeentch, was so hard to get in the United States. Actually, it was. I'll talk about that.
Yeah,
was super difficult to get. The Slaves to Darkness was much more commonly or widely released. So let's go ahead and dive into that one. Slaves to the Darkness was the first of the 2 to be released. It focuses on Khorne and Slaanesh. It looks into like demonic forces and demonic warbands in fantasy battle and battling in the chaos way. So you have multiple warbands, and there's been a lot of different flavors of this. Honestly, when Warcry got announced, it took me a while to warm up to it because I so badly wanted Warcry to be that.
So the interesting thing is just for clarification, this covers both Warhammer Fantasy and 40K.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, in fact, more so fantasy. Mm-hmm. But in the Slaves to Darkness book, the opening narrative little flavor text on page 5 recounts the sad tale of Inquisitor Thrax, who is dealing with somebody who has found a blasphemous object, and then he falls victim to it, and his little henchman comes running in, and as Thrax is like tracing this malign sigil. Yeah. And his little attache runs into the room to deliver a report. And then it says something in effect of like, and the foul beast that was Thrax sunk its teeth into the clerk. And like, he's given over, and there's this picture of this thing ripping apart a person. And, these are not child friendly. These books are definitely not a thing GW would do today. There are pieces of anatomy being shown that they would not show. There is descriptions of gore and content that are suggestive and not appropriate. So the one thing these books have that is fascinating today, and also while it would just like useless, there are so many D66 tables. Mm-hmm. Demon names, demon weapons, the name for your demon weapon, the attributes of your demon weapon, the sub-attributes to your demon weapon, how many followers your demonic prince has. Is he a demon prince or a magic? It just keeps, it's literally pages and pages of demonic trait tables. My favorite one being demonic names. Like you can roll up a name for you. We did this back in the day with my buddies and I. We had our named characters, and I don't remember what mine was.
That's so fitting for Chaos to have the D66 tables, and I feel like it's one of the few factions that has continued that tradition into modern 40K.
Yeah, the randomness was genuinely random. If you like this sort of thing or you're a little curious about it, Trent of Miscast on YouTube just recently started making a Chaos Orc warband based on these books.
Oh, that's
He's done
cool.
about 3 videos. Their vlogs is his style, so it's not going to be hyper focused.
Right.
I adore Miscast content just because it's absolutely unbridled creativity. Just let yourself be creative like the little kid in you was. But yeah, he's done some stuff with this recently that's just fantastic. So the last 80 pages of Slaves to the Darkness really focuses on 40K. And the thing you have to remember out these books is we take Khorne and Slaanesh and Tzeentch and Nurgle kind of for granted. Like they've just always been there.
You shut your mouth.
Okay. Hey, I'm the guy with the demon army who wishes he had more codexes. That these were the defining works. Like they were in other books. The Horus Heresy had its first codification in Adeptus Titanicus. I know who I'm sitting next to. I didn't want to get that wrong. But this really gets into defining chaos warp space. So I wrote in here the first chunk of the 40K chunk is called Chaos Warp Space, and I said it's Psykers, the Warp, and you, and everything you need to know. It's a self-help book. It gets into the fall of the Eldar. The relationship between the Emperor and the Illuminati is covered in there for those who are into that sort of thing.
Oh, nice.
It covers both kinds of demons in 40K, both summoned and those that arrive from possession, and how to have your characters explode or pursue possession, or to just summon them up as we do now. And then it gets into Chaos Renegade Warbands, which the closest analog we have, this is not a thing that exists anymore. But if you can imagine an army made up of demons, Chaos Space Marines, Traitor Guard, and then throw in some Age of Sigmar models, you'd be starting to get there.
Oh, to throw an Age of Sigmar models.
Yeah.
Because everything you described so far is Black Legion.
It is, yes. Black Legion is the modern, like, codified, let's make this playable.
Yeah.
There was no intention of this being, like, balanced or playable because chaos.
Right.
Like, you are literally rolling up your warband. And then do you have a Minotaur with a bazooka
I'm following you.
and a spiked tail? No, you probably don't. Well, you could make one.
Get one.
And then the middle pages of the color section show you how you could do this.
Oh, yeah. I just showed Josh some of the crazy models
like
in here.
Cypher with pink horror hands on it, something similar to that. But,
Yeah, it's the Jess Goodwin Chaos Sorcerer.
But I love some of this,
Red
like
conversions,
this is super early stuff before anything. Thousand Sons Marines.
Yeah.
Not all of the Thousand Sons are mighty sorcerers. Some of them do not have the necessary psychic talent to make use of all their arcane knowledge. Not true anymore.
Yeah.
Even so, they have studied the art of sorcery over thousands of years and have a keen understanding of the mystical aspects of the warrior craft. Their ornate armor reflects their arcane knowledge, being highly decorative and covered with runes and magical symbols. Although they cannot use psychic abilities themselves, they do have the ability to concentrate the power of chaos around them so that other wizard champions can benefit from their aura of energy. Like, that's initial concept.
Uh-huh. So here's a crazy thing in so Carl's right now looking through Lost in the Damned, which focuses on Tzeentch and Nurgle. The Nurgle section mentions Mortarion, and there's a section about Mortarion.
Oh, how interesting.
None of the other ones, because in the first book, Slaves to the Darkness, we talk about World Eaters, Emperor's Children, and Black Legion.
Yeah.
You can check that one out. None of those make specific mention of demon Primarchs. The Primarchs weren't fully conceived yet.
No.
So I thought that was really fascinating. Another thing that's in Slaves to the Darkness is the Ordo Malleus and Grey Knights. Their list is in the Slaves to Darkness book because, well, what do they exist to do? Fight demons. So they got to be in the demon books. Yep. Yeah. All right. So let's jump into Lost and Damned. So many more tables because now you need tables. All those tables I mentioned, by the way, I didn't cover this. Each set of tables exists specifically for the god you're playing. So then the second half of the book is the other set of similar tables, but for the god you want.
You know what's interesting about this is
somebody thought this all up.
7th edition, 40K, I think it was 7th. The Demons Codex that came out had a lot of tables in it.
Mm-hmm.
It did, yeah.
Remember, you would roll for all these crazy things.
That's your powers, you had to roll.
Yeah, in a way, it's almost like they were trying to harken back to this, but I think that ship has sailed.
Yeah, it's just not that game anymore.
Yeah.
So now it's the story. This one, it's interesting. The second book, Lost in the Damned, is actually laid out very differently than Slaves to the Darkness, and it doesn't have a 40K section. Whereas the other one,
all spread throughout it.
It's all mixed together. The other one, like I said, gets into these like different style, like what is warp space and what do the Eldar have to do with that? And whereas this one just kind of, it's sprinkled in. It has a giant section on narrative campaigns and how to run a narrative chaos focused campaign.
Wow.
genuinely, when I flipped through it, I was like, there's a lot of this that's still weirdly useful. There's a whole section on the dark tongue. Now you can speak chaos too. Congratulations. Chaos monoliths, both kinds, in Earth and in space. So giant floating space odyssey and or chaos shrine doodads. That's cool. And then we get into the Star Child, which is a bit of lore they may have moved on from.
That was what I just stumbled across a few minutes ago.
The Star Child is the baby emperor, sort of, in the void, the potential baby emperor. But then little bits of the Star Child have to be protected for the future resurrection of the emperor. So then there's Sensei. And the Star Child Sensei are the chosen protectors.
Right.
Which, okay, I'm going to bring this back and I'm going to theory craft this a little bit, which you could say possibly are somewhat like, what was her name that you talked about? Beatty?
Oh,
Beatty.
yeah. The saint. Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be a sensei. Or
Got it.
But not the Star Child. The Star Child is like literally the reimagining of the Emperor. And there's a very Sylvester Stallone looking rendition of one of these. It is comedically bad. But yeah, so you have this whole thing of the sensei and these like divinely chosen super beings that go around looking for the Star Child that is the reincarnation of the Emperor, that when the Emperor fell to Horus, he didn't fully die. He like released his consciousness.
Right.
And that's what the Astronomicon is this is not a thing we're doing anymore.
I can kind of see why they excised this from, yeah.
The good thing is though,
It's good.
there's tables and rules for how to make a sensei.
Yes, they are.
Nice.
Creating
So-
a Sensei adventure band.
Wax
There it
on,
is.
Wax off.
The mark of the Star Child.
So now you got more Chaos Renegade lists. Again, all the flavors of Chaos mixed together. You've got a section for Nurgle, a section for Tzeentch, Death Guard with, again, I mentioned Mortarion discussion, which is really, to me, I thought was just fascinating. I was like, I didn't remember that at all.
Yeah, he was locked in early.
Yeah, that it's like, hey, this, and partly it's like, I've thought this, a lot of the stuff we've gone through is when a name is right, it's just so good.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
all of these books have these moments that like you read off the name of something, you're like, man, I just want to know more about that. And
Yeah.
Mortarion, tough to beat there. The Thousand Sons are featured, as Carl was reading from. No mention of any one-eyed mutant leading them. Also featured,
or dust-filled suits of armor.
yeah,
Right.
we aren't there yet. We are
Right.
just not there yet. Also, Chaos Squats, Chaos Orc Freebooters, and other sundry Chaos armies you might want to play. Because if you want to play Squats and you want them Chaos flavored, they had a handful of models, so why not do that? And then literally Chaos Orc armies is a whole thing. These books are too big. I mean, I'm talking about like 600 pages of stuff to do any more than an overview. If you get
And literally like 10 pages of this is crazy amounts of content. It reminds me, for those who are Dungeons and Dragons players, of the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide. It's like, this is just like a treatise on
Jam-packed.
jam-packed full of stuff.
Yeah, it never takes a breath to allow you to get your senses
Right,
about you. Like
right.
as you're reading it, it's interesting. Little bit of preview if we do this again. I have the modern equivalent happened. They did make a modern equivalent of these books. These books were also reprinted, and I'm sorry I couldn't find a date.
Yeah.
I believe they are available at Warhammer World as like you can
They
go.
might be. I saw them there the last time I was there, which was several years ago, but I think they got reprinted around 2019.
Yeah, and prior to that, these were crazy collectible. Like it was very difficult.
They were expensive on eBay.
Right. Very proud that mine are original printings. Their bindings are still intact because those of you, my Rogue Trader is a shell that holds pages. These are still in good shape. My Lost in the Damned is in pretty, it's
a really good shape.
yeah, I'm shocked. My Slaves of the Darkness is showing its age, but it's still all together. If you get a chance to sit down with these, just sit and flip. And it's one of those fun books where you can just open it up wherever.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. And I was like, oh,
this
it's
is cool.
interesting.
Wait, what is this piece of art?
Right.
And there might be a description or there might not. If you like chaos, you have to do yourself a favor and try and track these down. Just to, like I said, when I was a kid, I copied, like went down because I had to go somewhere to get to a copier and paid to copy the color plates in the middle of the crazy conversions
yeah.
just so I could look at them whenever, because a buddy of mine had a copy of Slaves to the Darkness. Yeah.
You know what's really fascinating is the center of this book, like where the binding reaches the center, is this picture, which is probably the first ever rendition of Horus versus the Emperor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The classic Jess Goodwin, lest I'm mistaken.
Yeah. This is
Later, Mike McVeigh's famous.
drawn by Adrian Smith.
Adrian Smith.
Yeah. But then
The Keith will never
rendered
forgive me.
into a miniature diorama
By Mike McVeigh.
by Mike McVeigh.
Who is featured and called out. If you read the who did these books, I mentioned Rick Precy and Brian Ansel as like the lead designers on these.
Yeah.
But it is a list of the foundational people who turned Games Workshop from a company that was distributing Dungeons and Dragons in the UK, which is how they started, and turned them into their own thing. And it was around that 87, 88 timeframe that the whole thing clicked. And I don't think it's hyperbole to say that the definition of what is the prime antagonist in all of their worlds, the Chaos Gods,
Yeah.
that getting codified may have had more to do with the whole thing blowing up and being what it is today than anything else.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
and the silhouette of a Space Marine.
Yeah,
Like those
for
two
sure.
things going together.
Right.
And you know, that was that spark. And here we are today with, you know, unlimited hours of enjoyment. But yeah, when you brought this up, I was like, even though they're less 40K and more fantasy, the degree to which they're foundational, I was like, this had to be my first choice.
Oh, this is really, really cool. I'm really glad you brought these. I haven't looked at them in a long, long time. But man, these are really, really cool.
Yeah, and it's just like all the stuff we talked about of like it's whimsy and it's serious and it's horrible, but it's also funny and it
really embodies what Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40K are about.
Yeah.
Or it were about.
At that time, yeah, especially. But chaos and it's super foundational
As an
for both
antagonist,
40K
yeah.
and fantasy, and how much just crossplay there is in chaos.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I was just looking at the credits here too. Some of the stories in here are by Rick Priestley, who also, you know, he's credited Rick Priestley. Brian Ansell, as you said, wrote the book, but also William King, who I've only ever known as a Black Library author, wrote some of the stories in here. So that's just really fascinating.
Yeah, I think I would be shocked if anybody listed there still works for them. I know Alan Merritt moved on a few years ago. A few pre-pandemic.
Bill King, I think is what he goes by, but I think he wrote something recently. I could be wrong, but
I mean, it's a short list.
It is
of
very
who's
short.
Still,
oh yeah,
you know, I mean, Goodwin's I think just an advisor anymore. Same with Blanche. Like there's nobody really hands on. But again, the degree to which those defined this thing we've all come to know and love is not a small one. So those had to be my choice. And yeah, if you want to pick up original copies, I'm hoping the reprints eased that up. But even at a quick glance, I think each one's gonna set you back.
Well, you know, and what's interesting, you said,
unfortunately.
oh, you know, they wouldn't print these today because there's anatomy and whatnot. But I feel like they just reprinted The Lost and the Damned. I don't know that they reprinted Slaves, or I thought they did just one, but
I don't know. I mean,
I could be wrong.
They reprinted them. I guess my point was this is not something they would produce.
That is
today.
true.
Yeah, that was more so what I was meaning. Is the content is not, well, I mean, it's just nonsense. Like it's just so inconsistent or
it's
chaotic.
Just all over
it's just
all
chaotic.
over the place. Yeah.
Gotta love cocaine.
And the 80s. There it is.
That's fueled by chaos. All right.
Warpstone.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And thanks for sharing the assassin stuff. I think that's super fascinating. So what we'll do now is we're going to take a short break. We're going to come back and we're going to close. Welcome back. We're going to close out the show now with a few final thoughts as we move forward. Do you guys have anything else to add about? I mean, we kind of during the break talked a little bit more about the Realm of Chaos books.
Well, I hope
honestly,
crazy. Like what I got out of this, as we're creeping towards 10th, and that is undeniably the direction of things for all of us.
Yeah,
like rekindling my love of like what is so cool about 40K lore, you know, and I think the thing that I found really enjoyable about discussion was that you can place the lens wherever you want as a player of the game. You know, you can be campaign level, strategy level. That's fine. You can get down into the most elite comic booky absurdity. We go to 11 that you can, or you can just roll on a D66 table and let her rip. Like it, you know, it's just fun that you get to make that choice. Obviously my role playing of the last few years is showing here of like,
Sure.
you know, wanting that space for yourself as a player. And
Yep.
I think that's one of the things I'd lost touch with a little bit when I soured on the game mechanics, was then not getting to enjoy that narrative in that way. You know, I love that these examples are, so hopefully it was that, you know, as folks were listening and enjoying us yammering about this stuff, that it was a reminder maybe for some folks about that same sort of thing, that, you know, you can forge your own narrative.
There you go.
Yeah, there's so much story to 40K that doesn't necessarily translate onto the tabletop, but a lot of this is kind of what lit the fire or has kept us fueled over the years when we have played less, or, you know, in between painting models and games and things like that. Like, there's so much to engage with on so many levels from that lore and story perspective that kind of taking the stroll down memory lane here and revisiting some of these things. Like both the 3 books that you guys brought, I've flipped through before in the past and just enjoyed there, but like having that in even more depth and context of like hearing you guys talk about it and everything that it entails, is just fantastic artifacts.
I think we take kind of for granted the breadth and depth of lore that Games Workshop has now produced over 30 years about this game in particular and about everything around it. I mean, you know, I said earlier I'd read through all the Space Marine books, and so I then went on to these Gaunt's Ghost novels that I had no interest in, but it was only 40K left. God help me if I tried to read the entire library of Black Library stuff right now. There is so much material there that keeps getting expanded upon. You know, it's incredible. It's incredible. There really is just so much to this game that allows us to honestly do a silly show like this. You know, it's you say it's a niche hobby and whatnot. And well, what do you guys, you know, I've had people where, well, what do you guys talk about on a podcast? I'm like, oh, let me tell you, there is so much to talk about.
The tippy tip of the iceberg.
Unpacking.
There it is.
Yeah.
So wait a minute. Do you have your number 2? If we were to rack this and do it again, do you know what you would pick?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
I got a top 3 already that I
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So
well,
that
let's see what people think. And if you found this enjoyable, please engage with us through our Facebook group. You can join that. We've seen a lot of people join since we restarted the show, and rather quickly. The thing I would say is, if you're listening to this and you haven't joined the Facebook group, please do answer the questions, as we decline everybody that doesn't answer questions to join the Facebook group. And it has saved us from a lot of spam. So we do appreciate that. As I just mentioned, we do have a Facebook group. It's a very popular community. We also have a Discord group. You can catch Josh and I and others on that are on the show on that Discord channel from time to time. And feel free to tag us if you have some feedback you want to give us. So we're open to that there. Leave us reviews on iTunes. Reviews, boy, I haven't said that in forever.
Yeah.
Right?
I missed it, honestly, last time.
But, I wanted to show you some of the stats, Josh, from the downloads, which are a lot more solid than I expected after coming back. Like, I mean, it's down a little bit, but not nearly where I thought it would be down. Like, it's substantial and healthy. But you can also see, like, where are people getting the show? And without a doubt, Apple iTunes is number 1 by a long shot.
Wow.
By a long shot. So, please do leave us reviews there, or through whatever podcast feed, thing that you're using that allows for reviews. We do appreciate that. And, and the YouTube channel. You want to talk a little bit about the YouTube channel?
Yeah, absolutely.
Smash that like button.
Smash that like button.
God, I hate that so much.
I thank you. So I will never say it in one of our videos, so we'll mention it here. But this is the one time I did make a little animation to just remind people to subscribe and like, because it's all algorithm based, so it helps spread the word of the show's return, and just helps people who are interested. Like, it's interesting just looking at the metrics on the YouTube side of things, is like there's a lot of just parallel adjacent nerd content that our show's now being suggested for as, hey, you watch this, maybe you'd be interested in here too. So hopefully it just helps get helps spread our community to even more people and just keep growing that feel. And the feedback on the video has been awesome. Just people saying how much they feel like they're sitting on the third couch over here, just being a part of the group. Like
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's exactly what we want.
For. Yeah.
And you know, we looked at the video after we did it. We already are like, okay, here's where we need to make improvements. Here's where we need to change some things. So I think you're going to see, this is new territory for both of us in some ways. And so you're going to see iteration upon iteration quickly as we move forward.
It'll just keep getting better from here.
Yep. So great. So anything else you guys want to add? Or are we good to go?
Great to be back.
This is Carl.
This is Josh.
This is Jody.
And we're coming to you from the Astronomicon, where we dig through the past so you don't have to.
And exitus acta probat, a.k.a. the outcome justifies the deed.
The light of the Astronomicon may occasionally falter, but the realm of chaos is eternal.
Oh, yes, it is.
And so good.
And we will see you next time. This episode of The Independent Characters is protected by the Creative Commons license. If you have further questions as to its use, you can find information on the front page at theindependentcharacters.com.